and you'll be on the mountain and someone will say to me, I've got a tyre pressure light coming on my left foot, which is code for I've got a blister.
Yeah.
Nims has a vortex. When you get close to that vortex, you get drawn in. It was so unstable and so unsafe that as a 13-stone Westerner, I was not allowed in it, over and on the ground floor.
What if the limits you think you have aren't real? Today's episode is about redefining what's possible, not just in business, but in life. I'm joined today by Glen Mallen, Director of the Nimsdai Foundation, an organisation working across education, disaster relief, environmental impact, and taking people to places like Everest Base Camp and Kilimanjaro to completely transform how they see themselves. We're talking about impact, resilience, and what happens when you stop accepting limits. Let's get into it. Glenn, thanks for coming in. So what is the Nimsdai Foundation?
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here. The Nimsdai Foundation is a charitable foundation that was set up by Nimsdai Purger, otherwise known as Nims, in 2022, with the aim of really trying to give back to the mountain communities that supported him. His record on the mountains, whether it's 14 Peaks, the K2 Winter Summit, and the more recent event that he's doing, which is the hat trick attempt, which is to go over the 14 Peaks and the 7 summits on all of the continents for a third time, and this time without oxygen, is just incredible. And it's that sort of principle of nothing is impossible, which is the founding principles behind the purpose of the foundation, which is to take his ideas and redefine what is possible.
Amazing. Well, big shout to Nims. Obviously, I've been on that journey with him a little bit because I've just got back from Vincent.
Sure.
So I'm as branded up as you are today. I'm in orange and you're in green. So that's great. What are the pillars of the foundation? What are you trying to do?
Sure. Well, we've got 4 pillars. The first pillar is education. So we try to seek projects that can really change lives through education. So we look for school scholarships. We try and uplift communities through education. We try to keep children in education where possible. A lot of the communities, the rural communities in particular, are moving to the cities, and therefore education in the rural areas is really important. So that's one of our strong charitable pillars. The second is environment. So we really try to focus on cleaning up the big mountains. That's our sort of flagship project in that area. So we look at removing the waste that is accumulated about over 8,000 metre mountains, which is, as you know, in the press quite a lot at the moment. So we've done that a few times, and over the last 3 years, we've removed over 1,124 kilograms of waste from these mountains. And to put that into some sort of context, that's around the same amount of waste that's generated by an average UK household in a year. So, or 3 average UK households.
I guess that's really tough. Like the altitude, the Sherpas are obviously there to carry people's bags and support people. How are you getting them to carry the waste instead?
So it's about trying to find a balance. So what we make sure is that we don't create an industry through this activity. So what we want to make sure is that we encourage them to carry the bags, and we pay them and respect them for what they do in that context. And what we then want to do is then provide them with a bit of extra funding to be able to remove the waste afterwards. The challenge we have is it's not like picking up the waste at sea level. This waste has been frozen into the ground. So it's a bit more challenging that. Technology is moving along, and we're trying to look at how we can use that technology, whether it's drones, and going into partnerships really is the way to be able to sort of do that more effectively.
Okay, so we've got environment, and then we've got education.
Yep. The third one is inspiring others, which is quite a broad area that we focus on, and that's about picking projects that really do uplift communities. Another flagship project, which we'll probably talk about later, is our Porterhouse project, which is, again, supporting the porters, giving them the respect, the right pay, and in this particular case, providing them with an incredible facility which is safe and fit for purpose. Yeah. We also, under that project or that area, we look at what we've called Project Odyssey, which is where we take veterans to these incredible environments and allow them to recuperate and recover from whatever trauma they've experienced in their service.
Okay. And then is there a fourth one?
There is indeed, yeah. So disaster relief, and this one's quite reactive. So what we tend to find is, when we have a disaster, whether that be an earthquake or a flood, typically in these types of environments, access to them can be extremely difficult. At those times, what we tend to do is we will put out a campaign, and then we will use that campaign to raise awareness of the situation on the ground, and then we'll use the skill sets of our porters and our teams that we've got on the ground to be able to go into these communities, whether that's providing shelter, food, and just sort of water, those types of things, for the immediate response. Yeah. The long-term response comes in afterwards.
So is that global or is it just in Nepal?
It's predominantly in Nepal, so we will focus our energy in that area because that's where our teams are based. But we are looking and would respond if the need was there to be able to go to places like around Kilimanjaro, which is where we also do some of the work with the veterans. So
Amazing. So this is obviously started by Nims. Where did the idea come from?
it's a good question. I think Nims recognises that his success is on the back of the people that supported him at that point. His history and where he came from his small village to where he is now, and the recognition that he's got. He's always wanted to give back. It was an opportunity to be able to set up a foundation that allowed that to happen.
Yeah. And how's it been set up? Have you been in the foundation since day one?
No. I've always been in the third sector, the charity sector, since the age of 17, and I joined the organisation just over 2 years ago.
Okay.
And like all these things, Nims has a vortex. When you get close to that vortex, you get drawn in. It's it's infectious, and it's a great place to be. And his ambition and his drive and motivation allows you to really achieve and redefine what's possible. Setting up the charity, it was set up, but it needed a lot of governance. It needed new trustees, and that's what we did and focused on over the first couple of 6 months. And then what we were able to do is really look at how we wanted to be able to support the communities and the people that were able to do the work that we've achieved over the last couple of years.
Cool. So let's look at Project Odyssey.
Mm-hmm.
What is it, and how's that been changing lives?
Sure. Well, part of Nim's journey was not only to do the mountaineering. Prior to that, he was in the services and has a really strong connection with the Special Forces and with the Gurkha regiments. And what he wanted to do was to be able to give back to those individuals that had some struggles as a result of their service. And from that, Project Odyssey was born. The idea of this project is that we take veterans who may be struggling with psychological or physiological challenges, and we take them to these iconic locations, whether it's Everest Base Camp or the summit of Kilimanjaro. And what we do is we work with these individuals a couple of weeks before we take them away, and we have a welfare officer that will work with them on an individual basis and a group basis. Yep. And then we will take them onto the mountain, and we find that the environment on the mountain, altitude, and just the awe of that location allows them to open up in a way that environments, potentially medical environments or military environments, have never allowed them to do. Yeah. They're also alongside people that have shared that experience. So not only does the welfare officer enable that conversation to start, they obviously help each other as part of that journey. And when you're hiking for, say, 5, 6, 7 hours a day, you really do get under the skin of what some of the root causes of the problems are. So we work really closely with them on the trek, and it's quite inspiring to see them transform over that sort of 14-day period. And then once they return, we'll again work with them about what their lessons have been learned, where do they take those lessons. So it's not just a matter of saying thanks very much, handshake, off you go. We'll sit down with them afterwards with the welfare officer and then sort of work through how and what they can do now and what the next stages of their journey might be.
Okay, is that something that people can apply to go on, or how do you select those people?
Yeah, so obviously the first thing we need to do is fund it. That's always the challenge with these activities. So once the funding's in place, or a high percentage of the funding's in place, we will start to go out to, whether it's individuals, whether it's organisations that are connected to the military. So in some cases we've gone to other charities, and we will ask them if they've got individuals that they know of. And then what happens is that those individuals will write a letter of expression of interest. From that, they will then be interviewed, go through a more formal process, and then from there, we will then make sure that that first session that we sit down with them is really quite detailed. Not because we don't want to take them onto the mountain, but we need to make sure that the mountain is the safe place for them. Yeah. Because if the nature of the situation that they're experiencing is only going to be exacerbated or to a point where we've got a serious issue on the mountain, it's the last place that we really want to have to deal with that issue. We've never had an issue at all. We've always managed to sort of understand that and make adapt for that. So that's been really useful.
Okay, and how big's the group?
It depends on the funding.
Because you've just been, haven't you? Did you go last year?
We just got back from Kilimanjaro. Yeah, so we did Everest Base Camp 2 years ago. We did Kilimanjaro last year, which was incredible, absolutely incredible. And we found Kilimanjaro really interesting because when you go on Everest Base Camp, if you've never done it, there's internet pretty much most of the way up. And we found that people still operated they've got their phones back out.
Yeah, they struggle to switch off kind of thing.
Where Kilimanjaro, that didn't exist. They came into the tents and they sat down, and they really did switch off. So that's a preference in terms of location for us. But no, it was an incredible experience, and everyone remains in contact. That group is very, very strong to this day.
I think you get that in every trekking group to a certain extent, because you come out of your environment and you don't necessarily, you might have internet, but you don't have the same quality internet. You don't have it during the day. You might just have it at camp, so you can switch off. I love it for that reason, that you can literally just switch off, and you're in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing to do, so you do just talk, and you build up this kind of camaraderie with people that you end up talking to for years and years. Like I did Kili two years ago, I think, with you guys, and I still speak to people now that are on that trip. And it is like a bonding exercise. Like you can get people from all walks of life. Like it doesn't matter where you've come from, and when you're just talking for 6, 7, 8 hours a day wandering, you do connect.
And it's incredible that even though we work with these individuals prior to the trek, often what comes out on the trek has got nothing to do with what they were initially being assessed for. And that's the root cause of why they're on that experience. And we're expanding that now. We really want to be able to take we do 1 trek a year. We'd love to do 2 to 3 of these things, so because the feedback and the impact is phenomenal.
You do like a North Star.
Yes.
Don't you?
Yeah, we've got 2 models that we use. A North Star is a tool that we use with the individuals, as I said, prior to them going onto the trek. And we'll sit down with them on an individual basis and just ask them a number of questions around their physical health, their emotional health, and how they interact with others. So we get a sense of where they are on a number of different questions that gives them a visual scorecard. It's not something that should replace any medical assessment, but it gives us and them a really clear visual thing. And it's the feedback we've had on that is it's so simple. Sometimes it's better than the more detailed assessments they've had. It gives them a sort of spider's web of where they are today. We do that 2 to 3 to 4 times before they go, and then a couple of times on the mountain, and then we'll do that afterwards. And then what you'll end up with is an idea of where the real pinch points are. But on the mountain, we also use a tool called, from a book by Rob Smith, that essentially is a check engine light. And what that does is a really simple tool to understand how someone's feeling at any given moment. And what you'll find is that you and I will have an internal dashboard. You right now will know whether you've got a warning light coming on, and depending on your approach to that warning light is whether you do something about it. And typically men, not only men, but typically men will avoid dealing with that warning light. And that warning light might be flickering on and off every now and then, but then will become more prominent and then potentially stay on, and the problem has become quite serious. So we use this model in a way that's really quite simple, and it's quite interesting because it gets adapted very, very quickly and adopted very quickly by the team. And you'll be on the mountain and someone will say to me, I've got a tyre pressure light coming on my left foot, which is code for I've got a blister. Or but altitude can start to have its effect, and they can start to say, I've got an oil warning light coming on. And it becomes a way of communicating in a way that doesn't have to say, I've got a problem, particularly from a military background where they don't necessarily want to...
want to be as open and,
Correct.
and kind of open themselves up to it. That's such an amazing way of kind of trying to encourage people to say how they feel when they don't know how to communicate it. So it's such a
and
simple
it applies
way.
in everyday life. I mean, that's what we do when we leave the mountain. We say that, the lessons you've taken from this experience, you don't necessarily have to say, and you may not know what the problem is, but the warning light is the key to go and either get some support or get some help, and it's the acknowledgement of that warning light. And I use it now, even with my kids. I'll sit there and say, what's going on today? And
Kind of flat tire.
flat tire. And it is funny though how those communications on the mountain, you'll hear someone say, I have got a tyre pressure light going off.
Well, it's just finding a different way of doing it than I don't feel good, like I feel tired. And I suppose if you've been brought up in the military where you've got to drive forward all the time and there's no time for emotion, sometimes it's hard to say I've got a problem. So just finding a different way of doing it. Amazing. What was your favourite part of Kilimanjaro?
I always find it interesting when we do these treks. I think you go to Everest Base Camp and the Himalayas are incredible, and you'll spend all day looking up and finding, just awe. But you do walk for sort of 49 days odd and stand at the bottom of the biggest mountain in the world, where when you go to Kilimanjaro, you summit the mountain. And when I'm always there, I always find it incredible. The moment you pop through the cloud base and you start to go over towards the summit, every time I've done it, I just think it's just incredible, and it just takes your breath away. But I find that these locations and these places are spectacular, but it's the people.
Yeah.
That is what makes these treks absolutely fantastic. It is the people.
Yeah, it's both the people that are on the trip and also the guides.
100%.
Like, I've never known guides like it in Kilimanjaro. Like, that summit night we did, they sang from midnight till like 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
They sang their hearts out
Yeah.
all the way up. There was no stopping, and it didn't matter how tired you felt. Like, you just felt a little bit giddy that you just kept going because they were singing all the way up. And then we got to the top, and these bottles of Coke turned up from nowhere, and it was like fantastic. I mean, I love Kili, and it was a change for me because I was 27 stone. So although I wasn't kind of physically injured, I was very overweight, and I signed up to do the trip with you guys, well, with Elite Exped, and lost 7 stone in the transition to get there.
Well done.
Kind of on the basis I didn't want to go to the mountain with Nims, probably one of the best climbers, and embarrass myself. So there was like a pressure. It was like a drive to get me there. And then obviously I've lost another 6 since. I'm like 12.5 stone down now. So it's been a journey for me, and
Fantastic.
the mountains have been that for me. So to understand with the vets, it's kind of, you can understand how it happens.
Yeah.
I think my favourite part of it was, I think it was Camp 2, where like we had the biggest party ever. Like, it was just insane. There must have been 100 guides and Sherpas, or are they called Sherpas in Africa? I don't think they are.
Yeah, guides,
aren't they? But we just had a massive party for about an hour, and everyone sung and danced, and it was crazy, and it just brings everyone together.
It is incredible.
It's definitely a journey. I don't want to do base camp because I feel like I'll stand at the bottom and I'll look up and be like, I can do that.
That's the risk.
That's the problem.
That's the risk and the appeal, really.
Yeah.
I think you'll always walk and think, right, next time.
Where's
I'm
my
gonna
bag? Wait, have you got my bag? Can you get my 8,000 meter boots? Come on.
I've got a form. You can sign up today if you fancy it.
Oh, I'm not going to get the permission from the wife yet. I don't think, but it will come. It will come. So that's Odyssey.
Yes.
The biggest project to date is probably the porterhouse. Do you want to tell me about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, one of our flagship projects that 2 years ago was an idea. It was a piece of paper that was being banded around with a sketch of a building that we really wanted to be able to transform. So the porterhouse we're building is in a small village in Lobuche, which is about 5,000 metres above sea level. It's the second to last village before you actually hit base camp.
Okay.
And if you've ever been on these treks, they're only possible because of the porters. We all rely on them. And there is a huge part of the population that finds it quite difficult for these young, predominantly male, but there are females that do it, these young people taking Westerners or our bags up the mountains. And what I say to people is that the traditional ways of life, the traditional farming and that type of way of life has gone. It is now about the trails and the tourism that exists around those trails. So the key for us is not that we shouldn't be asking them to do that role. It's about respecting them in what they do, valuing what they do, paying them effectively. And in this case, it's about providing them with a facility that shows them that gives them the safety, the warmth that they deserve, having just trekked with all the bags that they've taken up for us.
Yeah.
And when we went to Lobuche, the building that we had there originally, I can only describe, for your listeners and people that are watching this, was like a cowshed. It was a corrugated iron building. It was so unstable and so unsafe that as a 13-stone Westerner, I was not allowed in it, over and on the ground floor. And it was immediate to me and to Nims that we need to do something about this, because the porters were trekking up, the porterhouse was becoming full, and then some of the porters were having to do a 3-hour journey back down the mountain to the nearest porterhouse.
To the next place to sleep.
To the next place, and then come back up in the morning again. So there were 6 hours on top of every other day work.
Wow.
So, as I said, 2 years ago, we sat down. Nims, in his innovative style, said, "I want that by next Thursday, if that's possible." And
he got the plan by next Thursday.
Yeah, and the answers, what I've learnt working with Nims is the answer is always yes. It's about how we get there.
Yeah.
Nims will always want it by Thursday. We've got to try and do it by the week after or whatever it is. So, but it's inspired me to know that there is always a positive outcome to everything we want to achieve, and that's really quite infectious. So the porterhouse is now at a phase where we're completing it in May. and it's gone from, as I said, this corrugated building. We knocked that down. We've put in a really high quality building. We've made sure that all the bunks have been replaced. All of the internal, they've got a medical room for the first time. It can accommodate 100 to 120 porters, and it is a space for them. In May the 27th, we're really excited to be able to open it up. We've got opportunities for people to join us on a trek if they want to come up and be part of that experience. They can get in contact with me through the foundation's website, and we can take them up as part of a trek to base camp, but be part of the opening ceremony of this incredible building.
Amazing.
I'm really excited.
So do the porters pay to stay there, or is it something that they get for free?
So they'll pay a nominal fee, and that fee will include the use of the power, which is all renewable. So where before it wasn't, it was generator led. We've got renewable energy there now. They will pay that fee for food, warmth, and we've also got a manager position that's going in there to be able to look after the building.
Okay.
But we've tried to keep that as low as possible. The key to this is that whilst the foundation and Nims and some of our incredible supporters have made that building possible, we can't do this without the people that have stepped up and said, I want to be part of that journey and that experience. We will hand that building to the community. It's not something that we will own. Of course, we're very proud of it, and we want to see it thrive for the future, but it is a community building. Very excited about that.
How do you even go about planning that? Like where do you start? Like, obviously in the UK, if you wanted to do it, it'd be an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
Like, how did you work out where to go, what to do, get the plans done, start work? Was that something you've just had to learn on the fly?
Yeah. My background is UK charities, and I even when I talk to people about building something in their backyard and the challenges that can get from transportation, from project managing that type of activity, this has been a really interesting journey for me personally. Not only have I had to learn cultural differences, language differences, time differences, all of those things are already blockers or challenges that you have to overcome. But if I go back to our founders' mentality, which is nothing's impossible, it can be done. The key to this is about finding trusted partners. So we found an exceptional engineering company, and they've been outstanding. And once you have that trust with those individuals, a working relationship that they understand what the expectations are of us, and particularly in terms of what we would classify as best practice in the UK. It still to this day makes me laugh that we had a video sent in from the team on the ground, and the team there, all the items were moved by hand. These boulders were the size of vehicles, and they were doing it in flip-flops, which is not unusual for that environment.
For that environment, definitely.
For best practice, and what we wanted to instill in terms of protection for the teams on the ground is that we then very quickly ensured that they had hard hats, high-vis jackets, and boots. Now, we can only do what we can do, and we provide that for them, but it's about making sure that the team on the ground were doing what we really were asking them to do, which they've been great at. And then every week we have 2 meetings a week just to make sure that we understand what the challenges are. And like any building project, it's thrown up a few challenges. Add that to the fact it's just on the side of Everest in the shadow of this, the biggest mountain in the world. It has thrown up a few challenges. And throughout the construction, there were 2 really quite serious natural disasters, which we had to pivot really quickly. And, we had booked all our helicopters for transportation material. We had porters booked. And very quickly we pivoted to be able to move that equipment to support the natural disaster. But that's what's great. A small charity is able to pivot really quickly and sort of determine what's important at that moment in time.
So it's due to open on the 27th.
27th.
Is that the start of the season, I think?
Towards the end of the season.
Towards the end of the season.
So we leave, if anyone's interested in coming along, we plan to go over on the 18th of May, and the trek is the 18th of May to 3rd of June. And we open on the 27th. But and I'm excited to see it because I've only seen it through videos and bits and pieces.
So when did you last go?
I went
when it was the old
when it was the existing building. So
I guess it's tough, isn't it? Because from a cultural perspective, that the housing there and the accommodation there isn't a great standard from Western standards. So to try and bring that in and look after them just shows the value of how you guys think that the porters should be looked after.
Yeah, very much so.
It's clearly not fair for them to have to walk 6 hours round trip after a full day of work just to get their head down.
Well, one of the interesting challenges which really threw me was that part of the discussions that we had with the community, it had to be a buy-in with the community, was that there was a nervousness that the building was too good quality for the porters. That was an interesting discussion from our side. Of course, we want to provide the best we can provide, and we want to make sure they're valued for all the reasons I said earlier. But for having the local community to say, well, actually, that's the same standard as the hotels that you're putting in, well, why wouldn't it be? They're still human beings that we want to
you
respect.
deserve it. Yeah, the
do.
work that you're doing.
Unbelievable.
I guess if they've never had it and they're not used to it, it's a really tough thing to accept, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, you're just trying to make sure that they're okay and survive and are warm at night.
100%. And they've come round and they can see what we're trying to achieve. And I think it sets the benchmark.
They've been involved in building as well, haven't they?
They have. Yeah, everything's
helps.
hand-built on the site, which is incredible. And everything was transported up by the teams because we wanted to make sure that it was an economy that we could support. But I think it, as I said, it sets a benchmark for what was possible. That redefining what's possible in in these environments, and I hope that we can do more of this type of projects, whether it's on the trail to Everest or it's in a different location.
Yeah. How much does it cost?
It's about $500,000.
Wow.
So it's not cheap, and a significant proportion of that is transportation.
Just getting the stuff to site.
Yeah.
Is that all? A lot of it been helicoptered in, or has it been
a bit of everything really? We tried to make sure that not everything was just going into the helicopter operators, so we wanted to ensure we engage with them. And the heavy items went up by helicopter, and then we wanted to ensure that when the climbing season ended, and the funding for the porters was going to sort of their income was sort of disappearing, that's when we switched to the porters to ensure that we could extend their season for them.
So the local economy kind of benefited from the work as well. Awesome. The big mountain cleanup.
Yeah.
I think there's lots in the news about the state of base camp at Everest and higher up camps at Everest. Is that just a challenge that's going to be ongoing? You're just going to keep trying to keep cleaning it as much as you can?
I don't think it's a long-term solution. I really don't. And I think we all recognise that. So, the local government is doing stuff, whether it's through legislation, and they're trying to ensure that, the waste is removed. So all we can do is we can do our part. We recognise that Nims's climbing company, Elite, is taking people to the mountain. But Elite has a really strong advocacy for cleaning up and removing the waste, so leave no trace policies, and that they certainly bring down the waste that they generate. And the waste that's there has been there for sort of 50 years. It's not something that's been there. Of course, it's accumulating, but it's been there for 50 years. So the solution is that it has to be removed simply because it's having a downstream effect. The waste that's sitting out there and degrading is in the watercourse, coming down the watercourse and affecting downstream water.
Which then affects the porterhouse, I guess, and everything 100%. Downstream.
Yeah. So it definitely needs to be tackled. I think the solution to it is partly to remove the waste in the way which we're doing. So that's whether it's removing old ropes, which we removed 65 kilograms of ropes that were still on the mountain in one go. And it's about making sure that there's a bit more of a joined up approach to how we do this, as opposed to one organisation, one foundation trying to do a small part. The reason why we do it, whether it's on Everest or whether it's on Kilimanjaro, hopefully this year, is we want to raise awareness. We don't want people to stop going to these environments. That's the last thing that we want. Yeah. We want people to be able to go and enjoy and experience these things for a much longer period of time. And the best way to do that is to raise awareness. And to make sure that, as I say, that by doing small parts, you are doing your part. So it definitely needs resolving, but that will come through, as I say, legislation and technology. I think there's more use of more capable drones at the moment. So rather than risking lives across the Khumbu Icefall, a drone can go up. We still need to put people at above 8,000 metres to actually get the waste, but they can bring it down to Camp 2 and then it can be flown off at that point.
Yeah, okay.
But it's not cheap.
No, I bet it's not. Because again, you're working at altitude 100%. In a very remote environment.
Yeah.
That's such a hard thing to organise, I guess.
And it's a remote thing for a lot of people. If I was talking to someone in the UK about the challenges of removing waste on Everest, for some people it's the disconnect.
It feels like a first world problem, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In a I suppose technically a third world country, it's still it's like being on a yacht and complaining that the sea's dirty. It's like, well, you can't complain. If you're there, you should be. Why can't you take your rubbish away?
Yeah.
If you can get there, you can surely get your rubbish down. I know it's not that simple.
It's not that simple. And what we're trying to do, actually, we've been running these UK trash treks. We want them to expand out. And And what that's about is that, yes, there is a problem on the mountains, of course there is, and we're doing something about that. But what we're also saying is that join one of our trash treks, run your own trash trek, which is a litter pick. By doing that, not only are you cleaning your local area, you might be raising some funds for the foundation, but we can talk to you around the challenges of the waste collection on the mountain. So it achieves three really key components, which is, we did one recently in our local area, and in an hour we removed 175 kilograms of waste, rubbish.
Just insane, isn't it?
Just incredible, and that's on a stunning section of the beach.
Yeah, in the UK.
In the UK.
It's just like, yeah, if we can't take our rubbish home at sea level on the beach in the UK, like what hope have people got remotely?
But it's a great opportunity to talk to people around, well, if this is what you can imagine this is like here, this is what we're trying to, and how hard that was, how tired you might feel. Now try and apply that principle to 8,000 metres when we were on oxygen and bits and pieces and doing it there. So it's a way of connecting people to a problem that exists, but they feel part of it in their local community. So it's a really good way of actually sort of making sure people are engaged with the topic.
Awesome. Okay. And then you mentioned last night the girls and the sanitary stuff. Do you want to talk me through that? Because I found that really interesting.
Yeah, again, I say we're really proud. We're proud of everything we do, but we are genuinely proud of this one because it's a partnership with an organisation that is in Nepal. We've titled it Project Odyssey. And what this means is it's empowering young girls. It's the Nepalese word for empowering young women. And what we are trying to do is, in partnership with Freedom Kit Bags, we essentially, for £25, you can fund a sanitary bag for a young girl. Particularly in rural Nepal, when a young girl has a period, they can be asked to leave education. They're asked to leave the schools. Another problem is that the male side of the family, in some of these locations, not all, don't understand the menstruational period process. And as a result of that, they remove them from the house.
Right, okay.
So these care bags, these kit bags, are manufactured locally, so materials are sourced locally in Nepal. They're made locally. And what they do is they provide a complete pack for a young girl for a year. It includes hygiene equipment, it includes sanitary towels, which are handmade. And part of that project is that we not only provide that care bag, but we provide the sewing machines that allow the women to make the items. Obviously the materials to make them, but it also includes an educational package for schools and for local communities, but it's focused at the men or males in that community, so they understand what's going on and that it's not dirty and it's something natural and normal, and therefore how to allow the girls to continue into education.
Wow. And how much was it for a year?
It's £25 per bag. So we're looking to raise around £10,000. We'd really like to provide 400 odd bags and get those bags out there, which just transform young girls' lives.
Yeah. Glenn doesn't know this, but Northern Telecom are going to put £1,000 in.
Oh, fantastic.
Straight away.
Thank you so much.
Because I think it's just such the £25 is quite a nominal amount of money, isn't it? It's not, in the grand scheme of things, a lot for a full year. And so it really hit me last night when you were talking about it. So we've had it signed off internally that we'll get the £1,000 in to kind of kickstart that project for you.
And that's my job, really. My job is to try and be the voice of these people. These young girls, young boys in certain the projects we're doing. So thank you very much. That's really appreciated.
Don't worry. Cool. We've done a lot on the foundation. I want to kind of talk about you a little bit. Just for any young people watching at home, I guess people don't necessarily think about working in the charity sector. It's not something that schools cover very often. How did you end up not just in the Nimsdai Foundation, but working in that sector?
Yeah, I mean, the charity sector is all about values. I don't sell anything other than values and belief. And as I said, I'm the voice of people to be able to get into places like this and have conversations with people like you. And I've always had a strong set of values. But my journey to this point was just after my 17th birthday. A very good friend of mine was driving his car, and there was a noise. It was a pager. I didn't know at the time, and he was on the local lifeboat crew. And we shot down to the local lifeboat station. He jumped on the boat and off he went. And I thought, what's going on here? That looks good. What's happening? And not so long after that, I joined the crew. And I recall vividly that, my mum wasn't overly keen, if I'm honest, because obviously there is a risk with all these
you
sorts
in
of
the
things.
water.
And my dad, bless him, just said, just get out of the house, so just do what you want to do.
Two complete opposites.
It was. And at those days, you only needed one parent's signature. So my dad was the one. So, and at that young age, I remember my first shout, within being given a pager, but 3-4 hours later, we were pulling 2 kids out of the water.
Wow.
And it just drew me in, and it was incredible. So I was a volunteer from that point on, and I very sort of quickly found a passion for being able to teach, and I was reading the books for my own benefit and then being able to sort of convey that to the rest of the crew. Very fortunate enough to then go and be offered an opportunity to work full-time in the training department. And like all these things, it's a journey. I started off literally so excited because I was given the smallest boat in the fleet at that stage. It was mine. And 16 foot, absolutely the most excited person at 18 years old, 19 years old, and worked my way up over the next 20 odd years through head of search and rescue at the training college at Paul. So ran that for all of their search and rescue sort of side of it. And then the last moment in the last sort of 4 years, I was the head of region for the Southeast, which was everything that the RNI did from Swanage to Southend, London and Channel Islands. That was my patch, and it was some of the best times of my life. I learnt so much around the charity sector. I learnt so much around working with people, and I'd gone through from literally one boat, to looking after everything on the south coast, which was with an incredible team. When I say that's the royal, we, if that sense.
Yeah.
So it was a real privilege, a genuine privilege to be part of that organisation. But I'd been there a long time. There was a change, and that gave me the opportunity to look about what I want to do next. And I was very fortunate to go straight into a franchise sort of charity called Homestart, and I was the CEO of Homestart Hampshire. And that charity supported families that had fallen on hard times, and small differences, whether it was providing white goods, nappies on one occasion, transportation to events. And it just showed me the level of poverty in the UK in 2022, which was staggering. It opened my eyes. And for me personally, having gone from a search and rescue background to something that was totally different, really pushed me, really made me think, actually, whilst I've been in the charity sector, not all charity sectors are the same. And not to take anything away from the RNI, they're very good at what they do to raise funds. Smaller charities like Homestart, like the one at the moment, Nimsdai Foundation, that's a very different model, a very different approach. You have to have personal relationships at a very local level.
Yeah.
And that was a challenging period. I really found that really pushed me as an individual. I loved every minute of it. The team were fantastic, and what we were doing on a day-to-day basis was incredible. And that led me sort of 2.5 years into that role, and I then bumped into the vortex of the Nimsdai world, which was really exciting. Not because I wanted to leave what I was doing, but there was another opportunity to learn myself, to push myself in a different world. And on this occasion, it was international. So I'd done something that was very, personal to me because of my background being operational. That was 27 years doing that. Then doing something for a community, and then to do something international. So it was always about looking for the next thing where I can make a difference. Yeah. But in each case, it was about my values aligning with the values of the organisation, aligning with the values of the founder, the values of what we're trying to do, because that's the most important thing to me.
How long has it taken for you to understand those values and know what drives your purpose?
I think I've always had it in me. I credit my parents for that. I'm very fortunate that both of them had strong values and brought me up, I would like to say, in the right way. I'd like to think I'm doing the same with my kids. They will be able to sit on this chat and see
what they put in the comments afterwards.
Sure. I'm going to be blocked, I'm afraid. Values for me have been the motivator for me. I'm not saying I need to pay a mortgage. Of course I do. I need to make sure that my kids can afford school uniforms and have the things that we want to have in life. I'm lucky I've got a very supportive wife that allowed me to do what I needed to do at the time to be able to, because it's not, charities at the levels that I was at never sort of paid the highest salaries. I could have probably gone out and done something, but it just never sat with me.
Yeah.
And I thoroughly enjoy. I mentioned the word privilege. I feel privileged to do this, and when I go home and I do switch the laptop off, or if I get to a point where I don't do this anymore, I want to be able to look back on myself and my life and think, did I do everything I could? Did I add value to my time here?
Just trying to make a difference, I guess.
Yeah.
It's really interesting putting kind of purpose above profit, because I think a lot of people struggle with that. I mean, obviously they've got to pay the mortgage and stuff, but like it feels like you're not motivated by money at all, and it's just about making a difference.
Yeah. It sounds quite cheesy when I say it, and I don't mean it. That is genuinely how I feel. I think I'm quite passionate about that, and not everyone feels the same. I get that.
Yeah.
But that motivates me. The thing I get out of it is far greater than a monetary value. As I said, but we still need to live and feed our feed the kids.
How did you find going from kind of operational training and that sort of role into the executive management of the charities?
It's an interesting transfer. I think first of all, I was definitely one of the team. I was, you were in the operational side of it, and then I remained operational the whole time I was in the R&I. I was still volunteering, and even that was quite interesting. Swapping from a senior leadership role and then to go to the station where you were responsible for that station. I think it was difficult to start with, if I'm really honest. It was a difficult transition because you still wanted to be part of the team. Not that you weren't part of the team, but you're in a different responsibility, a different role. And I found transitioning from, invites out in the evening and stuff like that to suddenly you're the boss now coming out. And, the relationship was very, very different. But I couldn't constantly potentially have issues with some of the decisions that were being taken if I wasn't going to be in the room making those decisions. So, and I like to think that whilst it was always difficult, there was always difficult decisions to be taken. I came at it from understanding the operational impact. That's what I think gave me credibility when I was in the leadership role. I could stand there and say, last Saturday, I was on the boat, and what you're proposing, suggesting or thinking of changing, whilst it's definitely doable and it might, tick a box in the spreadsheet somewhere, we've got 9 volunteers that are trying to do that. And that taught me a lot about that transition into leadership.
Yeah.
And you do need to take a step back.
So you were able to put yourself back in the volunteer's shoes and say, this is the net impact of what we're about to do.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good lesson, that.
Yeah, it's a useful thing to be able to do. It can be quite difficult to tread that line because you were sometimes, afforded information that you knew the direction, strategic direction, or the financial situation that needed to be enforced or to be able to make a decision, and you couldn't convey that in a way. You can convey the general sense of what you're trying to achieve, but not necessarily the specifics of it. And that was always a challenge. But I think it's all about building trust with your teams. I think it's about them feeling that you've got their best interests at heart, which was always the case. And as I said, I was very lucky that, because I was operational the whole time I was there, people, I like to think, would always go, there's clearly a reason why Glen's making this decision. So it wasn't because it was just a whim or something. I felt like it was always thought through and considered.
Yeah, he's doing it for the right reason. Like the logic is there. We might not agree with it, but he's trying his hardest, kind of thing.
And I think the same applies to the Nimsdai Foundation. The key for me is by having been to Everest Base Camp and been on the treks, and taken veterans there. When we hand that over to the next person, I understand, I can talk with some credibility around how this feels and why we're doing a certain way. Yeah. It's not to say that every idea is brilliant and we'll listen to those, but at least I can understand it from the being on the side of the mountain.
Awesome. Fundraising, what are you guys up to? How are you fundraising at the moment?
Fundraising is always a challenge. If anyone's interested, please get in touch. We are always open to anyone that wants to get involved in the work that we're doing or to support the work we're doing. The good thing about having such a broad spectrum of charitable pillars is that generally, if someone's interested in education, well, we have an educational project we can do. If it's environment, we have an environment project we can do. In terms of fundraising itself, well, there's a number of different avenues that we're always looking at. There's the funding aspects, whether it's corporate relationships, individuals that we want to work with, and we're building relationships with those all the time. But that that takes time, it takes opportunity, and we're really keen to expand that. We had a great evening last night in London where we brought people together, not only just to come and hear about the foundation, but for them to network themselves. Thanks for coming along.
Yeah, it was really good. Thank you for the invite.
You're welcome. And it was a great night to really showcase some of the projects that we talked about today. And then, so that's our sort of funding model. And then fundraising wise, we've got a lot of activity that's going on this year. If anyone wants to go to our website, we've got skydives later in the year that we're doing. We've got 2 big hikes that people can come along. We've got a Never Rest challenge, which is where we're going to try and do a step challenge up Everest as many times as possible in 24 hours in June. And the other thing I'd advocate, if anyone wants to do their own fundraising activity, it doesn't have to be something that we've organised. What would be great if someone came along and said, I'm doing a run, a challenge, I'd love to raise money for this project or for you generally. We're really open to hearing from people.
Awesome. Okay. What's the vision for 26, 27? Where's the foundation going?
Growth. Clearly, I think we would love to be able to do more with the outreach that we've got and the connections that we've got. So we would really, really like to expand the team. At the moment, the team consists of me, and we've just taken on a brilliant person called Mel, who's really a couple of days a week to be able to really help sort of take us to the next level. So we're definitely looking to be able to grow the team. We really, really want to be able to increase our income from donations and support. And of course, by doing those two things, we can help more people. And that is the motivation. It's about looking for more projects. We've got a number of projects we would like to do. It's just seeking the funding. And we've just got to balance the ask with the delivery. And it's just finding the right times to do that.
Cool. Thanks for coming in. It's been
Pleasure.
really, really interesting today, and I'm sure the viewers will find that as well. At the end of these things, we just do a quick fire round just to kind of delve in a little bit and maybe find some little bits of advice for people. Is there any business lesson, kind of what's the biggest business lesson you've found when you've been running these charities?
I think my biggest business is surround yourself with talent. I think when you're a young leader, a young person, you feel you've got to have all the answers. I certainly did. I felt I had to have the answers. People were coming to me as whatever the title is, manager, leader, whatever it is. As I've grown older and more comfortable in my ability, I know what my strengths are, and I definitely know what my weaknesses are. Other people will be able to tell me better what my weaknesses are. What I've learned through that process is if you get great people around you, you will be able to celebrate their success, and you will be able to celebrate the success of the organisation or the business or whatever it is. So surround yourself with excellent people who have the same values and beliefs as you, but may operate in a different way. They don't have to be the same. Confirmation bias is bad. You want to recruit in your own light and your own image. Doesn't necessarily have to be that case. Having someone that doesn't necessarily always agree with you can be challenging, but I'm already thinking of a few people in my mind that have done it, and they're still friends of mine now because they really held me to account. And sometimes whilst that's awkward at the time, and you always want to someone say, yeah, it's a great idea, they've been some of the best decisions and the outcomes because it's about that collective different lens at looking at the same problem.
Awesome piece of advice. Best decision you've ever made in business?
I'm going to, without sort of copying out, I'm going to go back to my first answer. As I think about recruiting, the best decisions I've ever had was about the recruiting process that we put in place. It's difficult, I get this, but we saw everyone who applied, and that is difficult. But the reason we want to see everyone is that sometimes the CV doesn't really tell a true story. And whether it's just a quick 10, 15 minutes on a Zoom call at the time. So I think a good decision is that sometimes allow yourself the time to recruit properly, and that will stand you in good stead far longer than trying to get it through because it's a time scale. As long as people know what you're trying to achieve. And I would, again, I'm thinking of individuals that probably, and including myself maybe, would never have been given the opportunity had I not been able to sit in front of someone and have a conversation around why I wanted the role, as opposed to, a matrix that said I hadn't ticked a particular box.
Yeah, cool. Is there anything you'd change over your career?
I think I'm proud of what I've achieved. I would love to have, probably it sounds terrible when I say this, I would like to have done this a bit earlier. I'm at a point now where I'd like to have, been able to impact potentially more charities a little bit earlier in my career, but I probably wasn't ready.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of what I've done, and I stand by my record, really.
Cool. Looking back, advice for a 20-year-old Glenn?
I could barely remember my 20-year-old Glenn.
Can you remember that long ago?
I think believe in yourself. I think that sometimes at 20 years old, everything is achievable. I love the energy I had. I remember, the nothing's impossible and redefine. That was probably more relevant to me as an individual then than it is now. But believe in yourself. Sometimes when things are really difficult, they're a life scar, a battle scar. I look back at some of the hardest things I've ever had to do, and at that moment in time, you can't see a way out, and it's a difficult decision, but it will get better and things will improve, and you will always learn from that experience. I look back at those situations and think, crikey, I remember that experience, and what did I learn from it, and how will I do that differently? So yeah, believe in yourself and learn from every day that you're in this environment, and be grateful for this.
For whatever's happening.
Yeah, for whatever's happening. Be grateful for it, because tomorrow could be a very different day.
There you go. And the final one, best book you've ever read?
I mentioned it earlier, actually. There's a book called Check Engine Light. And not only did we use it on the mountain for everyone that was going on the mountain, but it was a good book for me personally because it put myself in the mirror. I had to, there's me telling everybody else, if you've got an issue that you might want to, you've got a warning light on your dashboard. And actually, when I held it up and reflected on myself, there were things that probably I'd had a warning light going off. So for me, it was a book that allowed me to think about where my dashboard was and what was going on with me physically, emotionally, and really to have a time to address those.
Cool. Glenn, it's been an absolute pleasure today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in.
Pleasure.